Welcome to Future Learners, the show designed to empower students, parents, and educators. Join us as we explore the ever-evolving landscape of schooling, learning, and what it takes to succeed in today's world.
This episode is brought to you by Euka Future Learning, Australia's largest online, full-time education provider for pre-K through 12 students seeking a flexible, relevant, and meaningful education. Visit euka.edu.au today.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Future Learners. My name is Brett. I am the Chairman and CEO of Euka Future Learning. I am joined by my amazing co-host, as always, Ellen Brown, Founder and Head of Education, Euka Future Learning. Welcome to the show. Come on down, Ellen.
Thanks, Brett. It's great to get started.
Awesome. Before we do get kicked in, just a real quick shout out to a couple of people. We are teetering on 55-star reviews over at iTunes. So a shout out to Loz88. Loving this podcast. We are looking into homeschooling with Euka, and this is giving us some great insights. Well, hopefully you're already on board, Loz, and having a great experience. Speaking of great experiences, we have Rebe 101, Homeschooling Made Easy. As a homeschooling mum, I'm so excited for this podcast. We're new to Euka, and our first week has been amazing. Look at that. Wait for your second and third week. It only gets better. And I'm going to give one more to Shelley71. I'm looking forward to listening to each and every episode. Thank you for producing this fantastic podcast and discussing these important subjects that will empower our children. Oh, look at that. Get the warm and fuzzies to kick us off with there, Alan. And if you are new to the show, we'd love to hear what you've got to say. So head over to iTunes, leave us a comment, 5-star review, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere. Anywhere where you can type a nice message to us, you make sure you do that. And if there's any specific content or topics that you would like myself and Ellen to cover and dive into, please let us know. We have a list a mile long, but we would love to be able to get some feedback and thoughts from you as well. All right, Ellen, we have a very interesting episode today. We started talking just before we were recording, and it's quite an emotionally led topic for many reasons, and it affects many families. In fact, I'd probably go on record to say it affects everyone. It affects every human being. And we are going to look at the concept of nurturing mental health and how it can tie into education and, of course, with our children. So we're gonna tackle a big topic today. I will start the episode by saying if you experience mental health, or you've experienced mental health, or you are currently going through something in your life that you're just not sure about, or it's just not making you feel happy or fulfilled, what I would highly recommend you do is please reach out to someone and talk to someone about that. Ideally, obviously, a professional. Or you might just have a really good friend who's a really good listener and you just need to get something off your chest. Please do that. I highly encourage you to talk about it. So with that being said, Ellen, let's jump into this topic. I'm going to hand it over to you for a sec.
Yeah, look, it is a really tricky one. Nobody can deny that we're seeing many more teenagers, even younger children, with all kinds of issues and struggles when it comes to mental health. And so as a parent, I suppose, we're not professionals, like you said, so I can look at this from what we're hearing from parents who are coming through Euka. And we have a lot of people who are coming to Euka because their child is struggling with some mental health issues at the time and just needs to exit the school because that's what's, exacerbating the problem. And so as a parent, it's a tricky space to navigate. We know it's normal to be having all kinds of anxieties, or I don't know if we call it, the word anxiety seems to be a little bit specific, but teenagerhood is a really tricky time, an emotional time, a difficult time with hormone imbalances, and it is normal for teenagers to be up one minute and down the next and feeling sad and I've got no friends and now I'm fine and don't want to talk to you about it. All those kinds of things is normal. So, where do we start seeing what's not normal? What can we do Those kinds of things are really important to be able to talk about as parents and as educators as well.
And if we create a starting point here, and I want to preface this again, because this is a topic that affects many people that I'm very close to, and it affects people on very different spectrums. And I just want to say that, firstly, I absolutely believe and understand that mental health is real, and depression is real, and anxiety is real. But I also need to, and I'd be doing everyone a disservice if I didn't openly say, I think what is happening in a lot of cases is, because it is real, it is also being used as a backstop to stop and limit many people, not just our children, but ourselves, in progressing and pushing through and busting through something that might be holding you back, whether that be fear or, any forms of stress there. So I just want to make sure everyone understands my stance on this, okay? We all know someone who's been affected. Back in the day, if you ever said, I'm not feeling good, I'm feeling sad, the old adage was harden up, going, I remember in my workplace when I was a 16-year-old, when I got kicked out of high school, I was a cabinet maker, and my boss was bullying me. Like literally, I look at it now and I go, it was bullying me. He'd call me names and say, go and take a cup of cement and harden up and all of these things. And that was just the norm, right? That was just the norm. Now, I'm not saying that's acceptable way to communicate with anyone, but what it does is one of two things. Is for some people, that will be an okay way to be able to, when I say okay, it's not acceptable, but it's something that will yield a result. So for me, it actually didn't impact me for the rest of my life. If anything, it taught me some really strong, valuable lessons. But for many people, communicating like that and hearing that as an answer to, hey, I'm just feeling really sad or down and I'm not feeling like I'm being heard or listened to, can be a very detrimental way of communicating. So let's look at the impact that, mental health and anxiety is having when it pertains to education, because we did an episode a little bit back and we talk about this quite a lot. There was a study that came out where 2 out of 5 families, the children were literally refusing to go to school. So school refusal. So 40% of families. And the reasons for that was stated in the survey was due to anxiety and mental health concerns. My biggest thing that I want to tackle, Alan, I'd love to get your thoughts around this as well, is where is the line where we have to stand up and say, you know what, I think that this mental health banner is being taken advantage of, and you can see it through the spectrum of everything. I mean, you talked about this pre-episode of it's almost being glamorized now that having a mental health issue or having anxiety is the cool thing, or it's the in thing. And if you look at America and you look at the amount of people who are on antidepressants and anxiety and depression drugs, it's just baffling, right? Like, we won't get into that part of it today because that's a totally different thing, but we've got to look at where this all started from and what's causing this and what's keeping this a thing or making it worse. So where do we as parents, as teachers, as educators, as human beings, how do we distinguish the difference of, is this actually a depression state, or is this anxiety, or is this just maybe you're just not feeling good and you're going through the lulls of life in which we all go through?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the persistence of those feelings. So for as a parent, you'll see your child go up and down, and sometimes it might be a week or two and they're not in the in-group anymore, or somebody's being unkind. All those kinds of things can be real, very real, and really difficult to get through at the time. But then you'll see that that dark feeling doesn't cover everything. Often in that child's life, there'd be something that does bring them joy, a hobby that they do or that kind of thing. Now, when all of a sudden the child is withdrawing from things that they've always loved to do and is struggling with communication and is separating themselves from the rest of the family beyond what's a normal, typical teenager type thing, that's when you'd have to say, okay, well, let's have a look at, let's see if we can get a better dialogue on what's going on. It can be like all things in parenting, you can feel like you're completely out of control, but there's fantastic tools now that parents can even resort to before they even address the problem with their teenager. For example, on Headspace, there's tools that parents can go on, checklists that they can look at to give themselves a bit of insight, because no one ever wants to be in that awful situation where they didn't recognize those things. So that's where it can be tricky, because you don't want to say, oh, harden up or whatever. Like, there's a certain amount of grit that you want your child to have, but you also know, we've all heard where parents have said, I just didn't see the signs. And so it's a real balancing act between communication, making sure you're informed, even sometimes keeping a little bit of a diary, because sometimes you can think, oh my goodness, this has been going on for so long, and you realize, oh no, it's just been a couple of hard days. Trying to keep that kind of thing. And certainly when they are having a difficult time, locking into some of the things that give them joy is a big one. But what we're finding as a company is we're finding, with Euka, the kids that are coming from the school system, they're finding that they're getting stressed because they're a perceived pressure, often in their own mind, about their performance in school. And like you said, the glamorization on social media has been a real big one, because if you watch one person who's got a mental health issue, someone that you kind of see as a bit of a role model, and then they just sort of throw it out there, and you watch that, and that's interesting. The next thing you know, as we've talked about previously, when it comes to technology, AI will work in a way that then the next thing that you're watching is about social anxiety. You start to go, well, actually, yes, I tick all those boxes. And all of a sudden, a young teenager or even younger can start to believe and learn some of this kind of information, which is really, really problematic.
Information overload is one of the greatest causations. It's like you have a headache and you go to Google, next minute you think you got brain cancer or you've got this terrible tumor or something, because, symptoms are similar to this. It's like, oh my gosh. So again, it's the information that we let into our minds, and that comes back to this concept. And, whilst I'm not a trained professional, I'll put that out there, I do not have a degree in psychology. I have been obsessed about this topic since I can remember, to be fair. And I went to my first sort of workshop seminar back in 2008, and I was introduced to thinking about my thinking and being able to look at and combat, instead of feeling sad, how could I feel happy? Like, what do I accept? Because I'm always that sort of thinker in a way of going, well, if I'm doing this, there's other people who are feeling that. What is it that is going to make me happy? And of course, you go through the things of, I need a new car, or I need a new house, I need a holiday. That's what it is. When people say, I need a holiday, I'm just exhausted, it's like, you don't need a holiday. What you need to do is you need to do one of two things. You need to remove something that is happening, or you need to add it, right? And I'll just come back to the preface of, again, certainly not a trained professional here. I have many conversations with my friends who are trained professionals. I come from a very different, I guess, school of thought and a train of thought, but I've studied this concept, probably more than a lot of professionals, to be honest. I just don't have a certificate. Not that I need one. But my point here is this, is you generally need to remove or add something. And remove, it might be something within your environment that you might need to remove. It might be a person that you just need to remove because that person is just no longer right for your life, right? And what happens is we are creatures of being where now it's hard to let go of things, right? It's hard to let go of things. And you can see this in the most purest form. And I'll change topic for a real quick second, but this highlights the example of human nature is, if you look at the stock market and trading, and whether it's day trading or you're buying stocks, it's so easy to buy a stock, but people don't want to sell the stock because there's a fear of something. If I sell it, what if it goes higher, right? Same thing with people is like, a lot of people don't want to get rid of their friends because it's like, I can't no longer be this person's friend because they're in my class. So now I just have to put up with this attitude or this thing or this way of them being when you've realized that, you know what, we're just not right for each other. Like we see the world through different sets of parameters in different ways, and we've got different beliefs and so forth. But it's actually okay to go, you know what, this isn't conducive for me. And I know it's hard for a kid to do that. I absolutely know that. I'm not suggesting kids just go out and do that. But as parents, we just need to be aware of some of these things. And it can be as, and I won't say, I'll do quotes, but simple as uncovering that it might be a person, it might be a thing, it might be an expectation, right? There's something that can either be removed or added to that concept. But one thing I'll say is there is always sadness, there is always fear, there is always anger, there is always happiness, there is always joy, and there's always love around us at any one moment. Okay, now I know that sounds a little bit kooky, but it is. And let me just test you right now. Think of someone that you absolutely love, like to the nth degree, right? Think of that person, visual, like shut your eyes right now and bring that person to your mind, right? Imagine they're like sitting literally in front of you. And then think about, why do you love that person? What is it about that person that you, and then all of a sudden now you're in a state of love, right? You're in a state of love. Now, imagine someone that you dislike, right? Someone that you just vehemently dislike for whatever reason, bring them to your mind. Same thing. So my point is that it is always there, okay? So when we can start at a baseline and understand that there is love and joy there is anger and sadness and fear and all of those things at any one time. And I learned this very early on. This was something that Tony Robbins is very, very, I guess the world's leading expert in this particular framing, is that you can't be sad when you're grateful. You can't be angry and grateful at the same time. Now, of course, you also can't run around and just be in a state of gratitude your entire day or week or life, right? You need to be able to retrain our brains on how do we bring that way of thinking or that feeling that we would like to the real world, right? So an example is something so simple about teaching your children the art of gratitude, right? And it's not done in a sense of, oh, just be grateful that you got a TV, be grateful for this. It's like you got to really let someone feel what it feels like to be grateful, because when you are grateful, you can't be angry or sad or anything else as well at the same time, right? So you can't hold two emotions simultaneously. So if we look at that as I just want to make sure that you don't just think this concept of, go and be grateful is going to solve everything from a mental health capacity. It's certainly not. But I just want to make sure that we're sharing some real life tangible tips that you can start to implement effectively immediately, right? In many cases, you might only get a 5 or 6 degree uptick on this, but it could be the thing that stops your child spiraling even further, right? So really teaching the art of gratitude. And this is where it comes back into like a routine and generally a morning routine. I actually wrote about this in my book called Right Now, Why Not You and Why Not Now? And it's a book that I wrote in 2015 based around, a friend of mine passed away very close to me, taken way too early. And it lit a fuse in my mind about, I had a framework of living, and I like to consider myself as a pretty well thought through person, and I live very intentionally. Whilst if you hang out with me in real time, I could look a little bit sporadic, but I'm very intentional in the way that I live and do life. So I wrote this book with, because I said 2008, I was just fell in love with personal development and psychology and uncovering why we do what we do as humans. And, I took that collective knowledge over those, 7 years and obviously the many years prior to that living, to create a framework of how can we get, wake up and look forward to enjoying our day. And, I've had people come through my workshops and events and so forth as well, that literally just by going through some of these frameworks, it can make a massive difference, okay? This is not a cure to depression or not a cure to deep embedded anxiety. But as Ellen and myself have been talking about here, is not everyone is impacted at the level where it requires medical intervention, especially and or even needing to go and see a professional, although I recommend everyone see a professional because all it is you're essentially talking to someone who can help you think and work out what is actually happening in your own mind. So if we just go back to the gratitude component, is one of the things that is such a simple task to do is you wake up in the morning and you put yourself into a state of gratitude. You shut your eyes, and all you need to do is think of three things that you're absolutely grateful for. In my book, I talk about you do that in the morning, you also do that at night. So when you're laying in bed and, the last sort of thoughts that you hope to have is, look, you're laying in bed and you shut your eyes and you bring to life, because this is the thing. You can't just say, be grateful for your bike, be grateful for this. If you want them to be grateful for a bike, you need to teach them and train them and go, okay, shut your eyes and what is it that you're grateful for? So I'm grateful for my bike. Okay, bring a moment where you're truly happy about being on your bike, and you bring it to life, and you let them visualize and you let them feel it, because that's the thing. When you can feel the emotion, it will literally start to rewire your brain, and then you'll start to see other things that you'll naturally start to feel grateful for. Okay, so this is just a little exercise that I highly recommend, that you can sit down with your child and say, hey, look, and this is probably obviously, more the senior, the teenager type of student, because they'll understand a little bit more. Even though I actually do this with Ayla right now, she's only 3 years old. Now, whilst she doesn't fully understand it, she still says she's grateful for, one night it might be her sheepy, it might be her little bear or a little pug dog. But we're training it into her so it becomes something. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it does take a lot of effort. But I don't think there's anything more important than the mental health of our children. So just to wrap up on this little tip here is the attitude of gratitude, right? Is you bring that moment of where you absolutely believe and feel that you have gratitude for that said thing. And I guarantee you it'll start to teach you and train you to think differently.
So look, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Brett. When you have got a child that is displaying mental health issues, and you've gone through working out, okay, is this just the normal thing? But no, this is ongoing, and it's starting to spread to them dropping off things that they used to enjoy. There's a problem. One of the things that we have found is if that problem is sourced at school, and you've been through the school and talked with them and tried some different things with the school to navigate that, and you said, no, we really need to have a clean break here. What we have found is, even when students come into Euka, sometimes when they come in and they've been struggling with some challenges with their mental health, they've missed a lot of schooling, and the parents will often say, oh, well, let's just start again at the beginning of that year, or let's just go back a year. And this is where communication is going to be really important, because sometimes in doing that, it causes a stress, because all of a sudden they feel like they're behind their peers. And it's better for many of the students that we've spent time with for them to continue on where they would have been at school, and just grabbing some revision that helps them in any areas that they find, especially maths, where they find they've missed out some of those building blocks. So that's one less thing that's causing pressure in their life. They're not behind their peers. Sometimes we've found that they're starting a year ahead in, say, November. They've come out of school and they said, I'll feel like I'm in front. And there's a positive feeling in that as well. But for what you said about spending time yourself as a parent, looking at gratitude and things like that, because when your child is struggling with something, it affects you as a parent, in a really deep way. So focusing and prioritizing your own mental health so that you are able to support your child. So those kind of strategies that you mentioned are really helpful with prioritizing your own mental health. And the other thing I loved about what you were saying about doing that morning and night is just about routine. It sounds a little bit boring and old-fashioned routine, because, when they're little, you have this routine and it's bedtime and bath time and then bedtime and that kind of thing. But even teenagers thrive better in an environment, especially when they're having these mental health issues, where they know 6:30 or 7 o'clock, whatever it is, that's dinner time, and these are the expectations. Because sometimes when you're struggling with a lot of emotional things, the normal things like when should I have a shower, when should I do this, those kinds of things can really exacerbate the problem. So having bringing back into a routine that you've worked out together is really helpful when you're going through those times as well. Then obviously communication.
Communication is everything. It's my number one word that I try and live through, because if you can communicate effectively, then the outcome of said communication should happen far more seamlessly, and both parties or all parties should understand why and when and how and all of those variables. So I think the wrapping around the practicing gratitude, right? That's one element of a massive amount of toolkit that you could start introducing to your family as well, and start getting your children indoctrinated into this. It's actually really, really powerful and an amazing thing to take care of yourself mentally. You know, we do PE and you do physical education, you go to swimming, you go to ballet. That's predominantly for your physical ailments. Of course, it also very much helps the mental capacity as well. But it's, what are you doing for your brain training? How are you digesting your day? How are you helping your child empty their cup versus it just consistently brimming at the top and overflowing of emotions and things? Now, you might as a parent go, well, I'm not a good communicator. This is where I'm going to hold a hard line and go, that's okay. Most parents aren't, but it's also your responsibility to try and do your best at becoming a better communicator, because that's why we're parents, you know. We're here to help support and nurture our children as they are growing and growing their wings to fly out into the big wide world. So now, whilst you don't have to be an expert at this, just understanding first and foremost, but then also going, you know what, maybe you do need to go read a book or two. Maybe you should watch some YouTube videos. And I know many, many parents do that, and it's not easy. It's bloody hard. I'm also, I think I've got a lot figured out. There's things I'm just, oh my gosh, how do I do this? How do I get my daughter to finally eat her vegetables? Like what tactic can I use here? And it's like, oh, that's a good, I haven't used that before. I learned that from this person. So we just need to start understanding that if your child is acting in a different manner, and again, it's not always visually understood, or you hear it quite often going, oh, I didn't even see the signs. It's like, but were you actively putting things in play to put checkpoints in so that you don't need to get to the end sign where something bad's really happened, because maybe we haven't been paying attention because we're too caught up in our everyday lives, which is so easy to do. We all can get into that. Hence why I'm a massive advocate of, and if you don't want to teach your child gratitude, sit down at the end of the day and just say, hey, let's talk about our day. What was something that you really enjoyed doing today? Oh, I really enjoyed this. Well, why did you enjoy that? Well, I actually liked it because of this. Oh, great. What did you feel? Like, were you happy? Were you excited? And then they're starting to explore their emotions, and they're being given an avenue to start exploring their emotions and talk about it and discuss it. And not only that, all these other byproducts of, oh, my mum and dad care, or you're actually interested in this. And I tell you that will just create such a strong foundation. And also on the flip side, it's like, what did you do today that sucked? Like, what did you do that annoyed you? Or did anyone annoy you today? Anyone get on your mind today? Well, yeah, there's this kid here and he did this. And then you're allowing them to speak through it. And again, all you're doing is sort of asking questions and actually being curious and actively participating in working through your children's minds, right? And then you might go, you know what? That actually seemed a little bit off. That person there, I think there's more to this than that person. And that's where you may need to then go and seek a little bit more help or assistance, or find out a little bit more context around it.
Yeah. Oh, look,
right?
a little tip from having, I've got 5 children, as you know, 4 of them are boys, and boys are not necessarily very forthcoming in conversations. But what I have discovered is activity and conversation go really well with boys. So even when they're smaller and they're playing Lego, they'll talk. or when they're older and you go and do a hike or something like that, it just means that it doesn't feel so focused, and I guess it opens up to be able to share a bit more. So I've found that having conversations with boys, mixing them with activities, is a really great way of being able to do that.
That's a really good one, because again, for parents more so, is you think about, even hear the word psychologist and you have an association to it. It's like, oh no, something's wrong. You only talk to a psychologist on a couch, or, they're trying to get into my mind. It's like, well, yeah, and that's actually a good thing. But the stigma attached to it had been so inappropriate to go, oh, you've seen a psychologist. Why would you see them? Can't you handle your own thoughts? And that's a very bad paradigm that is still in this day and age. And, I've got some friends who have a mental health charity called Livin', which is, it ain't weak to speak, and it's all about men's mental health. And you're right. Men from my sort of era were growing up that you don't talk about your problems, you deal with it and you sort it out. You take on all the problems from your family and you should deal with it. And that's not a good way to live life. And I feel what has happened along that journey, and I mentioned this at the start, is it's almost like the pendulum's just swung all the other way back. And it's almost glamorized now, where it's so far out that way that you don't want to talk about your mental health again, because you're going to sound like a hypochondriac, or there's something wrong, or I'm part of this new craze of it's cool to have a mental health, or it's cool to be popping these pills for this because you're now part of the majority and not the minority, right? So it's finding the balance along that pendulum. But as it wraps back to our children, you would have all heard this one before, is when the plane is going down, the first thing you do is you put the oxygen mask on yourself. Why? So you can help your children and help everyone else around you. Same thing applies here, is you can't expect your child to be a savant of mental health and mental clarity and mental stability if you are struggling yourself, right? It all starts with us as parents. We do not know all the answers, and nor should you, right? But we do know that there is more than enough support and assistance out there in the world to start making headway through it. Because the byproduct of that is the more mentally stable you are, the more you understand what even anxiety is, the more you understand what mental health and depression even is, you're going to be light years ahead. Because what happens as well, as I know this for fact, is for a number of parents won't bring it up. They'll know that there's something there, but they won't bring it up because they just don't know how to handle it. Or they're like, I don't really know depression. I don't want them to kill themselves. It's like, I had a handful of people very, very close to me in that bracket. I've had some very tough conversations with them, and it was for, obviously the betterment of their health and their well-being. But it's hard, and you have to, at the very least, take that level of responsibility to assist in the journey, because it's a journey. It's always going to change. It's always going to evolve. But if you're not leading by example, then it's very hard for your child to know that is a good thing to do, right?
I'd really love to jump to, I guess some of just briefly the experience that we've had with students that have come on board. So what we have seen is that parents will often come to us and go, it's all over. They've virtually not been at school for the year. They're seeing a psychologist. We're struggling with these different challenges at the moment. And we've seen a couple of different things. We've seen kids that have come in and have taken a little while to get started, but because it's at their own pace, they've become more enthusiastic and moved on and have continued on. And then we've had kids that have been with us for a year and have said, now I'm ready to move back into mainstream school. I've gotten over those challenges. I've got some really great tools in order to be able to move on. And I suppose just encouraging parents that when your child is struggling, and if you decide, school is not a beneficial time because they're struggling with a mental health issue, not to feel as though that's the end, because we've certainly seen them come off and then go on through into uni and thrive. So it's just nice to know that there is a light at the end of that tunnel, and that just because they've had this struggle at this particular time of their growing up years, that it's going to affect what their potential or their possibilities are. And that's not the case. So it's just good to know.
I want to throw the blanket of optimism on that comment right there, because I look at it and I go, it's actually the start of the rest of their life, because there's a lot of people who will go through life and they can just manage and deal with the pain, and it doesn't get to a point where it even needs to be addressed. And that's majority of the population. The fact that it has gotten to a point where it is actually impacting them, it's like the disease, right? There's something in your body that is trying to come out. It's like when you drink alcohol, you got a hangover, it's because you poison your body and it needs to come out. It's trying to give you a lesson. Okay, most people don't listen to that lesson. They get back to it the week after. But when it comes to work, and the reason why I feel, and I've been on a big personal journey myself, and I know I've talked about it a fair bit, but I only say it because the more you experience and the more you understand about your experience, the stronger you become and the more experiences you will experience, because you're not as fearful or scared to be able to step into that realm of the unknown. Or I'd normally feel fearful here. I still feel fearful, but it's not enough to stop me. And it just creates that cascading event of experiences. And what you could be doing is, if you identify this in your child, and you're able to help them unlock that, why they feel like that, or why this is going on, or this is just part of living. Oh my God, is this just part of living? Okay, well, I'm full steam ahead now. I'll just run into those problems when they occur next time. You will literally create a far greater outcome than the majority of people who just sit and live in pain or anguish because it's tolerable. Where if you've gotten to a point, and this is even yourself, if it's not tolerable, then that's a good sign. I know it might not feel good in the moment. It might be terrible and you might think it's all over. But the reality is it's not. It's just getting started. The opportunity is ahead of you. Because once you get that toolbox and you understand how you can change and you can really start to architect the rest of your life, I mean, you're going to be unstoppable. So,
yeah, I love that. It's a great way of looking at it. It's certainly going to set them up with some really great strategies moving forward.
Awesome, Ellen. Again, we could talk about this for hours, but hopefully you, the audience, you've gotten some value from this, and we'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts on it. It's obviously a touchy topic, and it affects us all, and a lot of the frustration and pain comes from just the feeling of not knowing what to do. But just know that everyone is going through some version of stress through to the end of the spectrum or another, and our ability to identify that in ourselves and our family and our friends, and become a flag bearer of optimism and hope and a path forward is only going to create a better humanity, I believe. So, Ellen, I'm going to send to you for our final words. And I'm also, because I haven't done this, so this is going to be fun. So I'll get you just to sign off the show, but also let everyone else know where they need to go and what they need to do and all of the extra things that we normally say. I'm going to hand it over to you. Ellen, send us home.
Oh, no, I hope you're not going to tell me where I have to send people from. But I would just like to say, look, I'm just glad we were able to finish on a real positive note, because although it's a very difficult subject and it's something that most parents are going to have to address at some time, knowing that there's some strategies or that you're not alone in that is really important, and certainly being able to reach out and talk to others and other parents would be really valuable as well. So, Brett, you can tell us where people need to go.
Come on, Ellen. You've sat through 15 or whatever episodes right now. Now, here we go. So what we'd like you to do, if you haven't yet, head over to iTunes. What do I normally say after that? Or do you just switch off when I get to this point of the episode?
I just switch off, really. But that's because I'm not heading over to iTunes, Brett.
Yeah. Well, head over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Give us a comment, like, review, all of the buttons that you can press, as always. But more importantly, make sure when you finish listening to this episode, you go up to someone you love, give them a hug, tell them you love them, and have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you so much. And Ellen, you have an amazing rest of your day too.
Thanks so much, Brett.